Why is it that we say, "What a mighty God we serve," yet often treat his words as optional? If God is truly mighty, then his word must also be mighty. The issue is not that God's word lacks power. The issue is that we often lose sight of who is speaking, because when God speaks, things happen. Creation happened because he spoke. Light appeared because he spoke. The oceans stop where he tells them to stop. The stars remain where he placed them. The earth itself trembles at his voice. When God speaks, his words carry weight, authority, purpose, warning, instruction, life, and power, yet somehow we can hear his word and treat it casually. But why? Why do we diminish the weight of God's word? Well, number one is because it doesn't feel urgent. Many of God's warnings do not produce immediate consequences, so we assume we have time. We convince ourselves, "I'll obey later. I'll deal with that eventually. I know what God said, but right now." But delayed consequences often create dangerous confidence. Noah preached for years before judgment came. People continued eating, drinking, marrying, and living life normally. Then suddenly the flood arrived. The danger wasn't that God failed to warn them. The danger was that his warning didn't feel urgent. Number two, because what we want looks better. Often God's instructions conflicts with our desires. God says forgive, we want revenge. God says wait, we want it now. God says trust me, we want control. The struggle is rarely lack of information. The struggle is competing desires. The third reason is because of stubbornness. Sometimes we simply want what we want. We know what God said. We understand the instructions. We just don't like it. The flesh fights submission. The battle has existed since Eden. The fourth reason is because of pride. Pride whispers, "I know better. My situation is different. God doesn't understand this circumstance. I've got this." Pride does not always sound arrogant. Sometimes it sounds reasonable. But whenever we elevate our wisdom above God's wisdom, pride is operating. Satan understands the power of God's word. And one of the greatest problem or the greatest disappointment is that Satan often treats God's word more seriously than believers do. In the garden, Satan's first attack was not against Eve's behavior. It was against God's word. He said, "Did God really say?" He understood that if he could create doubt about God's word, he could influence everything else. Satan cannot force people to sin. He cannot create desires out of nothing. He looks for something already present: a fear, a wound, a desire, a prideful thought, a wrong belief, a moment of discouragement. Then he exploits it. James describes temptations as a process. We first have a desire, then we go through temptation, then we go through deception, then we sin. Notice that deception is always involved because Satan's primary weapon is not power, it is deception. He presents temporary things as eternal, harmful things as beneficial, sin as freedom, disobedience as wisdom, self-rule as better than God's rule. Everything begins with questioning God's word. Did God really say? Why do angels respond differently? This is a question believers should honestly ask. The angels hear God's command and move immediately. No debate, no hesitation, no negotiation, no delays. Why? Because they understand who is speaking. Their response reveals their understanding of God's authority. Meanwhile, we often question, delay, challenge, doubt, negotiate, ignore. Perhaps the issue is not merely obedience. Perhaps the issue is our view of God, because your response to someone's words reveal what you think about that person speaking. The weight you give the word reveals the weight you give the speaker. But here's what Satan cannot do. Satan can tempt, but God is the only one that can transform. Satan can deceive, but God is the only one that can reveal truth. Satan can influence, God can regenerate. Satan can blind, God can open eyes. Satan can attack, God can restore. Satan can exploit what is already there, but God can change what is there. Satan can tempt the heart, but God can remake the heart. The greatest miracle we have is that we have a God that could do things that no one else can do. We see that he has parted the Red Sea. We see that he has raised people from the dead. We can see that God can change a human heart. God told Ezekiel, I would give you a new heart. God opened Lydia's heart. God worked in believers both to will and do his good pleasure. Only God can do that. Only God can reach into the deepest parts of a person's heart and transform them from within. So here's our final challenge. What would happen if we truly believe every word God speaks carries infinite weight? What sin will we stop entertaining? What compromise would we walk away from? What delay would end today? What obedience will begin immediately? If angels move instantly because they understand who is speaking, perhaps our greatest need is not more information. Perhaps our greatest need is a greater revelation of the one speaking. Because when you understand the weight of the speaker, you begin to understand the weight of his word. And when God's word regains its proper weight in our lives, everything changes.